Welcome to Iceland. My name is Gylfi, the honest Icelandic guide, and today's journey takes us to the village Bakkafjörður in the Northeast District, where we start with the standard question: what comes to the Icelandic mind when the village of Bakkafjörður is mentioned? And some describe the village as a feeling of belonging to nature, where the silence can only be broken by seabirds or the soft splash of a distant whale. And others describe it as likely the most boring village in Iceland. And since it's only one way to find out, welcome to Bakkafjörður. The rural Northeast is by far the most unpopular region in Iceland when it comes to tourism. And Bakkafjörður village is a part of the municipality Langanesbyggð that includes the nearby village Þórshöfn as well. Population decline is a problem, and it doesn't help the villagers that they need to drive 30 kilometers for necessities, which is a challenge during cold and long winters. In one of the very few villages in Iceland that doesn't even have a swimming pool. And the only transport link they have is Highway 85, which is a part of the official Arctic Coastway, and the vast Northeast region is not even a part of the official Ring Road, which is a major mistake if you ask me. And I explain better in my video about the Ring Road. And as that is not enough, the town is a few kilometers away from Road 85. So to visit the village, we need a little detour, which is yet another obstacle when it comes to tourism. So let's talk about history. Why is this village here? And the main reason is that Bakkafjörður became a trading post in 1885, while the main industry was fishing, fish processing, and related services. Although the local harbor was actually never any good. So it was in the 1980s when a new harbor was built. So isolation is this very useful word to describe the life around here throughout the centuries. And still today, the rush hour consists of 2 tractors, 1 rental car with tourists, a bicycle, a lost sheep, and a wandering reindeer. They didn't get usable roads until the 1930s and 40s, and even now in 2025, Highway 85 has not been fully paved yet, although it is about to become a reality. So there is actually no problem driving around here, and it's actually way simpler than in many of the tourist-infested regions, since we are as far away from the city and the mass tourism there as we can possibly get. And in a way, we are as close as we can get to old Iceland. And I say this because the Westfjords, that we often call the Wild Westfjords, have been developing rapidly into a tourist destination. So they are not as wild as they used to be when the slogan was adopted. And at the same time, here in the Northeast, they are still at square one when it comes to tourism. And if the Icelandic tourism industry would collapse, they would never even know about it here and continue to live in perfect harmony until someone is stupid enough to turn on the radio to inhale some of the nonsense coming from the city, which isn't always good for the soul. So the people around here, they are just doing what they have been doing for centuries, minding their own business, producing healthy and clean food. So the story of isolation, it has 2 sides, of course. And let's move to my tourism test, which is in this case about food, or the general service level, where I expect to find public restrooms, of course. And I have to say that Bakkafjörður didn't score many points in that department, although I liked this old fuel pump very much, and it will only get better with time, with more salt, wind, and rust. And the petrol station itself is actually not a petrol station. It's just this rather tired old building that also serves as a restaurant, and a service center for the campsite. And when I arrived in the middle of the day, in the middle of the summer, it was closed. There was, however, a sign on the door with very strange opening hours, a bit too complicated for my taste. And they must have read my mind because when I came again, they had simplified the opening hours, but it was still closed. And although I'm not expecting a shopping mall in villages like this, I was hoping to get a cup of coffee, but that wasn't the case. And again, there are two sides to this story. The business might be too slow to have staff hanging around all day, but as for travelers, the service level, or the lack thereof, is the perfect reason to drive past the intersection to the village and forget about their existence. So sometimes sacrifices have to be made to put places like this on the map. So the village Bakkafjörður, it just can't score any lower than this in terms of service level, although the campsite looked just fine. So let's see what TripAdvisor was saying this time. And the results from that test were simple. TripAdvisor had never, ever heard about this town. And although I do often find towns with poor results every now and then, I can at least always find a place to stay or a place to find something to eat, and maybe even a tour with a local company. So as for Bakkafjörður, we can at least say that what we have is some kind of Icelandic record that's impossible to beat. And it was only after I searched on hotels.com and booking.com that I found an old-fashioned house by the coast. That was quite neat, actually. It didn't take me long to see that it might be a fantastic location for photographers, because the location was suitable for northern light photography and even astrophotography during winter, because we have this extremely low level of light pollution around here. No light from cars or tourists with flashlights interrupting, and it doesn't get any better than that. So I did some browsing and found out that the village is connected to the fiber optic network. So there is hope there for them. As for making Bakkafjörður into an alternative on the housing market for people who can work from home. And I noticed that several houses were being renovated there. And that is telling me quite clearly that this town is not giving up. So let's talk about the future options, because this municipality has the biggest business plans in Icelandic history in the works. And when we look over the bay, where the fog is coming in, there is a little fjord there called Finnafjörður, with deep enough waters for even the largest cargo vessels. And this location gave birth to the so-called Finnafjörður project, aimed at capitalizing on the new Arctic shipping routes, which are expected to open in the next decades. So the basic idea is to make the fjord into a transshipment hub connecting Asia, Europe, and North America, while it could also serve some of the current trade patterns and even oil rigs in future. And this idea has been researched since 2007. It emerged from the ice-free conditions all year round, and the plan involves the German port operator Bremen Port and an Icelandic engineering firm. And the planned port area spans 1,200 hectares with a 6-kilometer long transshipment area, including customs and tariff-free zones aimed at attracting international operators. So these plans are huge. It would be the largest construction project ever in the history of Iceland. And is this a good idea, might one ask? And as for both short and long-term benefits, there are many excellent questions that we have to answer first. The construction would be largely driven by foreign labor, and I'm not expecting to see small villages like Bakkafjörður grow permanently, at not least into some kind of local community, as we define them. And there is a reason for the population decline here, and it's not about jobs or the lack of jobs. It has to do with the distance from the city, and then it's the climate here in the northeast that is simply not for all to handle, because the northeast is not like the rest of Iceland. Like when I was filming here in 2024, the fog was coming in the fjord, not for the first time, and it had already covered the planned industrial site when I drove by. So I had to do the second tour in 2025 to film this bit, to finish video, and again the fog was moving in and ruined some of my filming plans that afternoon. And I simply don't see the ordinary Icelander saying, let's just move to the northeast, to the middle of nowhere, because there is some job there to be found. And as for the nature, we would be opening the doors for pollution accidents with irreversible effects on untouched nature. So is the sacrifice worth it, might one ask. And we might not even take this idea far enough to answer that question, because there are still so many uncertainties in the big picture. The project is completely dependent on year-round navigation, and that will only be technically feasible by 2060 or even 2080. So looking at this with common business sense alone, I don't see investment of this scale become a reality while we are still waiting for the Arctic ice to melt. And if that time would come, all it takes is a volcanic eruption like occurred in Laki 250 years ago that cooled the northern hemisphere to literally put such plants on ice again. So despite the plans that have already been done, this idea hasn't received much discussion in recent years, and I think it's because people are realizing that this is a long shot, and I'm a bit worried that the local municipalities have invested a bit too much mentality into this project. Mentality that might overlook everything else relating to job development, especially if it involves ideas like utilizing the untouched nature. For example, locals have now expressed interest in establishing a national park on the Langanes Peninsula. And my feeling is that those two ideas, the national park and the port, they might not work well together. So it might be the best idea to throw this port off the table and start doing something that could benefit the local municipality within months rather than decades, since there is a growing demand for the absence of mass tourism. And residents have been urged to come forward with job-creating projects and apply for grants, so they are trying, and that is positive. Tourism creates a flow, and flow creates additional opportunities for higher service level. And nothing happens without accommodation options, which is a problem in many small villages, since when the owners move or pass away, the properties often end up as summer resorts for relatives with no permanent residents paying local income tax. And properties like that, they might not end up on the rental market or Airbnb, which could be a good option in villages like this, although it has led to disasters where it's unrestricted. So this is a bit tricky and requires clever people in charge. And from now on, it will be a regular feature of this series to look into the local real estate market, because it's easy to see it online, and the housing market tends to come up with interesting talking points. And in this case, we have only one house for sale in the village, or the old post office, that has been partially renovated, and still needs more work, since it was designed as an office. And what makes this interesting is the fact that it might be the cheapest house you can buy in Iceland. The asking price is little over 100,000 euros, or a little over 1,100 euros for per square meter, which is a bargain on a market where decent properties go for 5,000 euros per square meters or even more. And the reason for this price has, of course, to do with job opportunities or the lack thereof, unless you can visualize yourself gutting fish for the local fishermen. The fiber optic cable could, however, be the lifeline to make a living from here. And if you are creative, this is a wonderful place to write dramatic poems about thick fog, very thick. And despite my little teasers about the weather around here, I kind of like this region. And I actually like it so much that while I was making the video, sourcing information, I found out that the internet address northeasticeland.is was free, or until I bought it. And I know exactly what I'm going to do with it. And the fact that I could just grab it is again telling me that they are not doing much marketing around here, leaving the region wide open for good ideas. And that will be my last words about Bakkafjörður this time. And as usual, if you like my content, you can buy me coffee in some other village than Bakkafjörður because I can't get it here. I'm leaving a link in the video description and on the screen if it works. And the next village I will cover is Þórshöfn. That video will be online soon. And with that, I'm sending you best regards from my home country, Iceland.